We've got it from here. Observers behind the rail." Lieutenant Colonel Brett Stauffer said it without turning his head. He said it the way a man says a thing he has said 100 times to 100 people who did not matter. His eyes stayed on the big board. His hand stayed on the rail of the senior duty officer's console, fingers spread, claiming it. The woman in the doorway did not answer. The combat operations floor of the Combined Air Operations Center ran 3 tiers deep, each tier a row of consoles, each console a face lit blue and white by a screen. The big board above them all carried the night's work: a high-value target, a grid, a clock. The clock was the loudest thing in the room. It counted down toward a window, and the window was closing, and every man and woman on the floor could feel it closing the way you feel weather change before it arrives. Stauffer owned the floor tonight, acting senior offensive duty officer. He had the watch, the room, the momentum. He was 43 years old, and he was very good at rooms. The woman crossed to the rail he had pointed at. She wore a plain flight suit. No patches. No name tape that anyone could read at distance. No entourage. No aide. No folder under her arm. She moved like someone who did not need to be told where the rail was, and she stopped at the one spot along it that had the cleanest line to the screens. She did not move toward the rail because she was told to. She moved because the rail had the better angle on the screen. No one else was watching. 47 years old. Brown hair pulled back tight. A stillness in her that did not match the room. Everyone else on the floor was in motion, leaning, typing, talking, drumming a pen. She was the one fixed point. Her arms were crossed. Her eyes were not on the center of the big board, where the target sat inside its grid. Her eyes were on the lower left, the edge of the feed, where a second smear of heat had appeared and had not gone away. Stauffer briefed the floor with both hands. Pattern of life is solid. 22 minutes of coverage. He's been in and out of that structure 4 times tonight. The window opens in 9 minutes, and it closes in 19. We do not get another one like this. He let the certainty carry. Certainty was his instrument, and he played it well. This is a clean shot. Let's be ready to take it. A few heads nodded. A junior captain echoed him. Clean shot, the way a floor learns to echo the man who has the watch. Stauffer glanced once at the woman on the rail. Augmentée, he decided. A late arrival. Somebody's liaison. A body sent to observe and write a report nobody would read. He filed her where he filed everything that was not the shot. Behind him. Out of the way. He did not see Chief Master Sergeant Audra Benton watching the woman, too. Benton was 49, the floor superintendent, 28 years in, and she had learned a long time ago that you read a room by reading the person who is not performing. Everyone on the floor was performing. For Stauffer, for the clock, for the shot. The woman on the rail was performing for no one. She was just reading. And the way she read, flat, fast, unhurried, her gaze moving along the seams of the feed instead of its center, was a way Benton had seen perhaps a dozen times in her career, and never in a person who did not matter. Benton looked at the woman. Then she looked down at the manifest in her own hand, the access roster for the night's floor, and she did not open it yet. She just held it. The clock dropped under 9 minutes. On the screen, the target structure sat quiet. A low building. Walls warm from the day. The center of the frame, where everyone looked. And at the lower left, 200 meters off, the second signature sat where it had no reason to be. It did not flare and fade like a generator cycling. It did not drift like an animal. It held. It had the patience of something with people inside it. The woman on the rail watched it the way you watch a thing you have decided not to take your eyes off. She still had not said her name. She had not been asked. Not really. Stauffer had asked the room to be ready, and the room was getting ready. and the woman he had waved to the back wall stood at the rail with her arms crossed and her eyes on the one corner of the screen the rest of the floor had already agreed to ignore. 9 minutes became 8. The green line of the launch checklist had not yet appeared on the board. It would. Stauffer was a man who liked the line where he could see it climbing. The woman watched the second signature hold its grid, and something in her face, not worry, nothing so loud as worry, settled into place, like a person recognizing a road they have driven before. It was the lieutenant who said it first, out loud, into the moving air of the floor. "I have a second signature." First Lieutenant Priya Anand was 26, an intelligence duty officer, 2 screens of her own, and a headset half on. Her voice came out steady, even though her hands were not. 200 meters southwest of the target structure. It's been holding position for 11 minutes. Stauffer did not turn. Heat bloom, or a generator. That whole grid's been baking all day. It's not cycling, sir. A generator cycles. This is constant. 11 minutes. No movement. No thermal variation. Anand pushed it 1 more inch than a lieutenant usually pushed. "I can't call clean PID with that sitting there." "You don't have to call PID. That's not your call." Stauffer said it lightly, almost kindly, and that was the cruelty of it, the lightness. "The shot's mine. Pattern of life is 22 minutes solid. We are not going to lose a high-value target because a heat smudge made somebody nervous." The floor moved on. That was how it worked. The man with the watch said heat smudge, and the floor agreed to call it a heat smudge, because the clock was loud, and the window was closing, and agreement was faster than argument. From the rail, the woman spoke for the first time. "It's not a heat bloom." Her voice was low and even, and it did not reach for the room. It did not need to. "Bloom doesn't hold a grid. That's holding a grid." Stauffer turned now. He looked at her, the way you look at furniture that has spoken. "And you are?" "Watching the same screen you are. Then you'll have noticed the part where I have a window, and you have an opinion." He smiled when he said it, for the floor, and a couple of people smiled back, and he turned away again, satisfied that the matter was closed. He should have asked the next question. The number. Because the woman on the rail had read the geometry in a single pass, and the geometry did not care who had the watch. 200 meters of separation. A slant range that put the second structure inside the weapon's effects radius if the wind held, which it would, because it had held for 3 hours. A collateral estimate that any targeteer worth the seat would have run before the window opened, not after the smoke cleared. She had run it standing still, with her arms crossed, in the time it took Stauffer to finish his sentence about windows. Anand had run it too. That was the thing Stauffer kept missing. The lieutenant was not nervous. She was correct, and being correct on a floor that has decided to be fast is the loneliest job in the building. "The cluster's growing, sir," Anand said, eyes locked to her own screen. 2 more sources in the last 90 seconds. Small ones, low and clustered, the way a family sleeps in one room when the night is cold. She did not look up. "That is not a target package. That is a household." But Benton had heard it. Bloom doesn't hold a grid. 8 words, the right 8 words, in the right order, with the slant range logic already inside them. It wasn't the language of an observer. It was the language of someone who had sat in the seat that makes the call, on a night when the call went wrong, and had never forgotten the grammar of it. Benton turned her head, slow, and looked at the woman on the rail. Really looked. The unmarked suit. The watch turned face inward on the wrist, the way operators wear them so the glass does not catch light. The stillness. The eyes that went to the seams. Then Benton looked down at the manifest in her hand. She opened it. She ran her finger down the access roster, the list of who was cleared to be on this floor tonight, and then she went past it, to the second page, the page most people never read, the delegation traffic. The line that said, "For tonight, for this target, who held the authority to release the weapon. Not the floor. Not the watch. One name, sent down by the air component commander himself, because the target was sensitive, and the law of it had to sit with one person who could own it. Benton read the line. She read it twice. Then she lifted her eyes off the page and found the woman on the rail again, and she went very still. The stillness of a senior enlisted person who has just understood that the most important fact in the room is the one nobody else has bothered to check. Anand was still at her console, jaw tight, eyes wet at the corners, doing the thing junior officers do when they have been overruled and they think they are right, and they cannot prove it fast enough. She glanced at the back wall, at the quiet woman, almost by accident. The woman met her eyes, held them. One steady look, the kind that says, "I heard you. You're not wrong. Stay where you are." Anand swallowed and turned back to her screen and kept watching the second signature because someone had to. On the board, the clock dropped under 6 minutes, and the green line of the launch checklist appeared at last, low on the screen, one segment lit, then two. Stauffer watched it climb and liked what he saw. "Windows close," Stauffer said, "because people in the back get nervous." He had stepped out from his console now, into the open lane between the tiers, where the floor could see him. He did this when he wanted the room. He was good at the room. "I've been doing this a long time," he said, "and I will tell you the pattern, because you'll see it your whole careers. There is always a window, and there is always somebody who finds a reason to let it close. A smudge, a maybe, a what if. And the target walks, and we go home, and 6 weeks later, that target does something that ends up on the news, and everybody asks how we missed it. He let that sit. We are not going to be those people tonight." It was a good speech. It had the shape of wisdom and the weight of experience, and it was aimed, without naming her, at the lieutenant who had said 11 minutes, and at the woman on the rail who had said, "Bloom doesn't hold a grid." Anand's face went red, and then went still. She was learning, in real time, the oldest lesson the floor has to teach, that being right is not the same as being heard, and that a room can agree on a falsehood with more warmth and more speed than it will ever agree on a truth, because the falsehood asks nothing of anyone, and the truth asks everyone to slow down. She had the data. She did not have the room. On a fast floor, the data without the room is just noise with a name attached. There is a kind of speech that is really a leash. It does not order anyone to do anything. It simply makes the cost of disagreement too high, dresses caution up as fear, and lets the room do the rest. Stauffer had given that speech 100 times. The floor tightened around him the way a floor does when the man with the watch has just told everyone that doubt is for cowards. A captain who had been about to second the lieutenant's call found something to type instead. A sergeant who had been frowning at the southwest grid stopped frowning. The pressure in the room did not push toward the truth. It pushed toward the shot. A junior officer peeled off from the speech and crossed to the back wall. He was young, and he was embarrassed to be doing it, and he did it anyway. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back behind the second rail. Floor's going hot." The woman looked at him, not unkindly. Then she stepped back. Behind the second rail, without a word, without a flicker, the way a person steps back who has decided that the argument is not the rail and will not be won at the rail. She kept watching. And she did the thing that operators do that civilians never understand. She let the insult go by without spending a single unit of energy on it, because the energy was needed for the screen, and the screen was the only thing in the room that was telling the truth. And she took a small pad from the chest pocket of the flight suit and a pen, and she wrote. The time, the call, the names, The second signature, 200 meters, 11 minutes, then 12, then 13. Holding. She wrote it in a small, flat hand. She wrote the time down. Not to remember it, so that someone, later, would not be able to forget it. On the board, the green line climbed past halfway. If you have ever stood in a room where the loudest person was wrong and watched everyone agree with him because he was loud, you already know how this feels. If a story about the quietest person in the room being right is the kind of story you came here for, take 1 second and subscribe to Honor Tales, because the people in the back of the room are exactly who this channel is for. The woman behind the second rail wrote down the time the checklist passed the halfway mark. 5 minutes, 40 seconds on the clock. The green line, climbing. The center of the board, quiet. The lower left, holding. Benton, across the floor, closed the manifest around one finger, keeping the page, and began, slowly, without drawing an eye, to move. Not toward the exit, not toward Stauffer, toward the row of secure phones at the head of the floor. "Get me a name on that observer," Stauffer said to Benton, low, as she passed. "Either she has a reason to be on my floor, or she's a security problem. Pick one. I don't want a stranger behind my rail when we go hot." "Sir," Benton said. It was not a yes. He had not heard the difference. He had a window. Benton crossed to the back wall instead of to a terminal. She stopped a respectful distance from the woman in the flight suit, and she did not ask for a name, because she already had it, and asking would have been theater. The woman wrote one more line on her pad. Then she looked up. "Chief," she said. "Ma'am." Benton kept her voice under the floor's noise. "You want to tell him, or you want me to?" "He has a window," the woman said. "He's not reading. People who aren't reading don't get told. They get shown. A beat. Not yet." Benton had been in the service 28 years, and she had learned to measure officers in the first 30 seconds, the way a farrier measures a horse by the way it stands. Most of them, in a moment like this, would have pulled rank already, would have walked to the center of the floor and said the word, "Colonel," and watched the room snap straight and felt the warm, clean rush of being obeyed. This one had not. This one was standing behind a rail she had been ordered behind, taking notes, waiting, not because she was timid, but because she had decided that rank was the weakest possible way to win this particular argument, and she was right. "You're waiting for the screen to prove it for you," Benton said quietly. It was not a question. "I'm waiting for the moment he can't argue with," the woman said. "If I stop this with my rank, he spends the rest of his life telling the story, as the night the colonel pulled rank and got lucky. If I stop it with the truth, he spends the rest of his life knowing he was wrong." She watched the green line climb. "One of those changes him. The other just embarrasses him. I'm not in this for the embarrassment." Benton felt the whole shape of the night rearrange itself in that one sentence. Not yet. The woman was not being passive. She was waiting for the moment when the truth could not be argued, when showing would land in a way that telling never could. Stauffer, across the floor, was logging something into the watch record. Benton drifted close enough to read it over a tech's shoulder. He was entering the observer, the woman, as an unauthorized presence on the floor. Flagged, name unknown, pending removal. He was building the paper that said he had done everything right. He was, without knowing it, writing down the exact moment he would least want written down. He was a careful man. That was the thing about him that was almost sad. He was not stupid, and he was not cruel in the ordinary way. He was a man who had decided what was true at the start of the night, and was now spending real care, real diligence, making the record agree with him. That is the most dangerous person in any war room, not the fool. Fools get caught. The careful, competent, certain man, building a clean paper trail toward the wrong end, documenting his diligence at every step, so that when it all comes apart, there will be a record proving he did everything right except the one thing that mattered. He had 22 minutes of pattern of life logged. He had his coordinates confirmed twice. He had his window timed to the second. He had everything a board would want to see. Everything except the 4 words the lieutenant kept saying, that reads like people, which he had entered into the log only as observer narration, dismissed. The sterile woman gave him nothing to read. No name, no rank, no patch, no folder. To a man already certain, nothing reads as evasion. He saw a security problem because he had already decided to see one. "Advance the checklist," Stauffer said to the floor. "I want us at release ready when the window opens. We are not going to be fumbling at the threshold." The green line jumped 2 segments. Annan's voice cut across the floor, higher now, the steadiness cracking at the edges. "Sir, the second signature is still holding. 13 minutes. If anything, it's gotten. There are smaller signatures around it now. Sir, that reads like people. That reads like a structure with people in it. Not a guard. Not a generator. Lieutenant." Stauffer did not raise his voice. He lowered it, which was worse. "Stand by your screen and stop narrating my floor." Something moved through the room then. Not a sound. Just a shift. The way air pressure changes before rain. A few of the people on the floor had been doing this long enough to know that you can feel a bad call coming the way you feel a fever coming, in the body before the mind. They did not have the rank to stop it, and they did not have the certainty to fight it, and so they did the thing people do, which is to look at their screens very hard and hope someone else would be brave. The brave one was 26 years old and had just been told to stop narrating. Benton stepped half a pace, not toward the exit, not toward Stauffer, toward the woman behind the rail. "Sir," Benton said, loud enough now to carry, the first time she had let her voice into the room. "You want to slow down." Stauffer's hand was already moving toward the release sequence on his console. Benton did not wait for him to answer. She crossed to a side terminal, one of the auxiliary positions along the wall, and she pulled the delegation traffic up where the screen would show it, and she stood in front of it, and she read it again, so that her own certainty would have no cracks in it. Release authority, Vesper, 1 call sign, 1 officer, named by the air component commander himself, for this target, on this night. Because the structure sat in a place where a wrong weapon would be a catastrophe, and the law required that 1 human being hold the release in their own hand and own whatever came of it. Not the floor, not the man with the watch. 1 name. Benton knew the call sign. Half the theater knew the call sign. The way you know a name attached to a thing that went wrong and was never allowed to go wrong again. A release authority who had once, long ago, been in a seat when a call went fast and bad, and who had spent the rest of a career making sure the seat never moved that fast again. She turned from the screen and went to Stauffer. Close, private, the way a chief talks to an officer she is trying to save. "Read the release authority line, sir," Benton said. "Read whose name is on it. Before you touch that sequence, read it." "I don't have time to read," Stauffer said. "I have a window." He did not even look at the side screen. He had decided what was true at the start of the night. "When the window opens, we release. That's the job. That's not your release to make. It's my floor. It's not your floor's call." Benton held his eyes. It was never the floor's call. The component commander pulled the authority up and out the second this target got sensitive. He gave it to 1 person. That person is in this room, and it is not you. For most of his career, Stauffer had understood authority as a thing you held by holding the room. Whoever the floor obeyed had the authority. He made the floor obey. Therefore, he had it. It was a simple machine, and it had carried him from lieutenant to lieutenant colonel, and it had never once failed him. because no one had ever stood in a room he was running and been quietly, structurally, on paper, above him without bothering to say so. The machine had no setting for that. He could not feel the rank he could not see. "Chief, I have known you 8 months," he said, and there was the first thread of something under the certainty now, something that was not quite fear, but was related to it. "And I am telling you, with respect, that if you do not get back to your station, I will note it. I have a window of," he glanced up, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and I am not going to spend it being lectured by my own superintendent in front of the floor. "Then don't spend it on me, sir." Benton did not move. "Spend it reading one line." For 1 second, something flickered behind Stauffer's certainty. A draft under a door. He almost turned to the side screen. Then the clock dropped under 3 minutes, and the window open marker began to flash, and the loudness of it pulled him back, and he chose the clock over the doubt, the way he had chosen the clock over everything all night. "Positions," he called to the floor. "Window opens in 2 minutes. Stand by for release. If you are still here, still watching, still on the side of the lieutenant who said it reads like people, do me one favor and hit subscribe, because in about 90 seconds, the quietest person in this room is going to pick up a phone, and you are going to want to have been here for it." On the side screen, unread by the man who needed to read it, one line glowed steady in the blue light. "Release authority. Vesper." And behind the second rail, the woman in the unmarked flight suit closed her pad and put the pen away and let her arms come uncrossed. There is a version of this woman the floor never saw. The audience gets to see it now, because the floor was busy and because some debts are paid in private. Her name was Naomi Calderon, Colonel, United States Air Force, 47 years old. And before she was a colonel, before she was a name on a delegation order, before Vesper meant anything to anyone, she had been a captain in a different war room on a different night, and she had learned the whole of her life in about 90 seconds. 2008. She was 30, an F-16 weapons officer, good, fast, ambitious. The way Stauffer was fast, she would think later. Exactly that fast. There had been a target and a window, and a man with the watch who liked the clock. There had been a ground party in close, a tactical air control party calling the fight from a rooftop, a young controller on the radio, with a voice that never once broke even when it should have, and there had been a smudge on the screen. A maybe. A what if. Somebody had said it the way Anand said it tonight. That doesn't read right. That reads like people. And the man with the watch had said the thing about windows, and the clearance had been pushed through fast because fast felt like courage, and the ordnance had gone where the certainty pointed instead of where the truth was. It was the wrong building, 200 meters off, the kind of error that fits in the space between a smudge and a shrug. The controller on the rooftop had been the one who caught the correction too late. Staff Sergeant Micah Trujillo, 24 years old. He had been talking when it happened, and then he was not talking anymore. And Naomi Calderon had sat in her seat with her hand still near the switch that was not hers to throw, but that she had not fought hard enough to stop, and she had listened to a radio go quiet. She had said it that night. That was the part she could not put down. She had keyed up, and she had said the building looks wrong, and the man with the watch had said we have a window, and she had not said it again. One time. She had said the true thing exactly one time, in a voice that did not reach for the room, and when the room did not turn, she had let it go, because she was 30, and saying it twice felt like insubordination, and saying it twice was slower than agreement. The difference between her at 30 and Anand at 26 was 4 words and 1 repetition. Anand had said it again. And again. Naomi Calderon had built 17 years on top of the silence where her second sentence should have been. No one blamed her. That was the cruelty of it. She had not been the shooter. She had not had the authority. She had only been in the room where speed beat truth, and she had not stood up, because she was 30, and the man with the watch was loud, and the clock was loud, and standing up was slower than agreement. She had decided, that night, that she would never again be a person who let the room be fast. She went to weapons school. She went into targeting. She made herself, deliberately, over 17 years, into the most disciplined release authority in the theater, the officer they handed the sensitive ones to precisely because she would not be hurried, because she read the seams, because she had a dead 24-year-old in her memory who held a grid for 11 minutes before anyone listened. She had made the fast call once when the room wanted speed more than truth. A man named Trujillo paid for the speed. She never made the fast call again. The authority was not a privilege. It was a debt she had spent 17 years repaying. And tonight, the component commander had pulled the release up and out and handed it to her by name, because the structure on the screen sat in exactly the kind of place where a wrong weapon ends careers and starts wars. And Lieutenant General Harlan Voss had wanted one steady hand on it. Hers. Vesper. She had walked onto the floor early, in a plain suit, with no entourage, because that was how she always walked onto a floor, to watch it work before it knew she was watching. And the floor had waved her to the back wall. She had let it, for one reason, so that when she finally moved, no one would be able to say it was rank that stopped the strike. They would have to say it was the truth. On the board, the window opened. The marker went green. Naomi Calderon uncrossed her arms and stepped off the back rail and walked toward the floor. "Windows open," Stauffer said. "Anand, final coordinates. Confirm release ready." Anand did not confirm. She made her last stand instead, the kind of stand a lieutenant makes once and remembers her whole life. "Sir, I am telling you, on the record, the Southwest signature is consistent with a populated structure. Multiple sources, clustered, low movement, holding 14 minutes. If that weapon goes, and I'm right, You're not the authority, Lieutenant." Stauffer's hand settled on the release sequence. "I am. On this floor, the release is mine, and I am telling you the shot is clean. Confirm coordinates, or step aside for someone who will." Anand did not confirm. She did the bravest thing a junior officer can do, which is to do nothing, to sit at the position she had been ordered to operate and decline to push the button that operated it, and to let the silence where her confirmation should have been become a statement of its own. "I won't confirm coordinates that put a weapon 200 meters from a household, sir. You can have someone else do it. I won't." Her hands were shaking now, openly, but her voice was not, and the difference between the body and the voice was the whole of her courage laid out for anyone to see. Stauffer looked at her for one long second, and there was a flicker in him of the man he might have been on a better night, a man who might have heard a 26-year-old refuse a lawful-sounding order on principle and stopped to ask himself why. But the clock was loud. He turned to the captain at the next position. "You. Confirm coordinates." The captain hesitated, looked at Anand, looked at the southwest grid, where the small signatures clustered low and still, looked at the clock. The floor held its breath. The green line stood one segment from the top, and Colonel Naomi Calderon let it. She let it reach the edge. She let the green line touch the threshold. She let Stauffer's hand rest on the sequence and let the whole room see the moment fully formed. The certainty, the clock, the hand on the switch, because a truth shown at the edge of disaster lands in a way that a truth spoken from the back wall never will. She had learned that too in 17 years. You do not stop the fast room with an argument. You stop it with a fact it cannot get around, delivered at the one instant when everyone is finally looking. It is a terrible thing to watch if you know what she was doing. She was letting the night come within seconds of catastrophe on purpose, because she trusted herself to stop it at the last possible instant, and she did not trust an argument to stop it at all. There is no courage in pulling rank early. There is only courage in standing at the back of a room with your hand near the line, counting the seconds down, knowing that you and you alone are the floor under everyone's feet, and waiting until the exact moment when stepping forward will mean something. She had run the timing in her head the way she ran everything. The abort would reach the aircraft in under 2 seconds. The weapon could not be released and recalled, but it had not been released yet, and would not be, because she was about to make sure of it with the one instrument in the room that outranked the man at the switch. She crossed the open lane between the tiers. Stauffer caught the movement at the edge of his vision, the observer, the security problem, the augmentee, walking onto his floor at the threshold of release, and something in him snapped from certainty to outrage. "Release authority is mine on this floor," he said. "Stand down." Naomi Calderon did not stop walking, and here, for the first time all night, she smiled at him. It was not a smile of triumph, and it was not a smile of contempt. It was the smile a person gives a younger version of themselves, small and sad and almost kind. The smile of someone who knows exactly what the next 10 seconds are going to do to a man and would spare him if the truth allowed it. It was the most frightening thing Stauffer had seen all night, because nothing in his understanding of the room explained it. People did not smile at the man with the watch. Furniture did not smile. "No," she said. "It isn't." And she reached the head of the floor, where the secure phones sat in their row, the direct lines, the ones that connected the floor to the aircraft holding overhead, with a weapon and a question and a thumb resting near a button, waiting for one word from one authorized voice. Stauffer's hand was on the release sequence. Her hand closed on the secure phone. For 1 second, the two of them stood 3 feet apart, each with a hand on the instrument of the night, his on the floor sequence, hers on the line that outranked it. And the room finally, fully, went quiet, because even the people who did not yet understand could feel that something at the center of the night had just changed hands. She lifted the phone. She keyed it. Her voice, when it came, was the same low, even voice she had used all night. The voice that did not reach for the room because it had never needed to. "Strike, Vesper. Abort. Abort. My authority. Get your hands off that phone." Stauffer was moving, reaching, his certainty curdling into something closer to panic. "That's not your line. That is not your call. Get your—" "That is the release authority, sir." Benton's voice came down across the floor like a blade laid flat. She was standing at the side terminal, one hand flat on the screen, and the screen was turned now so the floor could see it. Her name. Her call. It always was. Release authority. Vesper. And on the floor, a junior tech who had pulled the delegation traffic up on the main board, because Benton had told her to, 3 minutes ago, quietly, before any of this. Let it bloom across the big screen above them all, so there was nowhere left to not look. The release authority for the night's target had been delegated by the Air Component Commander, Lieutenant General Harlan Voss, to a single officer. By call sign. By rank. Vesper. Colonel. The strike had never been the floor's to take. It had never been Stauffer's. It had been hers from the moment the target turned sensitive, and she had been standing behind the second rail the whole time, watching the man at the switch reach for a weapon that was not his to release. Stauffer's face did the thing faces do when the floor drops out of a certainty a man has stood on all night. Confusion first. A small, almost childish confusion. The look of a man waiting for someone to tell him this is a misunderstanding. Then disbelief, as his eyes went to the board and read Vesper and could not make it mean anything but what it meant. Then recognition, the call sign, the story behind the call sign, the seat she had once sat in, the reason the sensitive ones went to her, landing all at once. And then, last, horror. Not at her, at himself, at the green line one segment from the top, at the hand that had been on the switch. Abort acknowledged, Vesper. The voice came back over the secure line, flat and professional, a pilot somewhere in the dark who did not know and did not need to know what had just happened on the floor below. Weapon safe, holding overhead, standing by for your call. Your call. The two words landed on the floor like a verdict. Not the floor's call, not Stauffer's. Hers. The aircraft had known all night whose voice it was waiting for, because the aircraft had been briefed off the same delegation order that sat unread on the side terminal, and the only person in the building who had not understood whose strike it was had been the man who had spent the night trying to take it. Over the secure line, the strike aircraft acknowledged the abort. The weapon held. The thumb came off the button somewhere in the dark overhead, and then the screen resolved. The second signature, the smudge, the maybe, the heat bloom Stauffer had waved away 9 times, sharpened as the feed steadied, and the floor watched the clustered sources separate into shapes, and the shapes were small, and some of them were very small, and the analysts on the floor did the math at the same instant, and the room made a sound that was not quite a word. A family. 200 meters from a high-value target, exactly where the weapon would have gone. The floor went silent the way a room goes silent when everyone does the math at once. Naomi Calderon set the phone back in its cradle. Gently. The way you set down something that is still warm. Stauffer was looking at his own hand. It was still resting on the release sequence, the sequence he had not, in the end, completed. Stopped one segment short, stopped by a telephone, and he looked at it as though it belonged to someone else, as though he could not quite work out how it had come to be there or what it had so nearly done. The certainty was gone out of him all at once, the way air goes out of a thing, and what was left was a man of 43, standing in the middle of a floor he had run for 8 months, understanding for the first time that competence and confidence and a clean paper trail had carried him to within one telephone call of killing a family. He would carry the lower left of that screen for the rest of his life. The small signatures. The math the floor had done all at once. He had not killed anyone. That was the mercy of it, and also the weight of it. He would never be able to point to a grave and say, "There, that is what I learned from," because there was no grave, because a quiet woman he had waved to the back wall had made sure of it. He would only ever have the almost, and the almost, she knew better than anyone, is its own kind of life sentence. She did not look at Stauffer with triumph. She looked at him the way you look at a younger version of yourself across a room, which, in a sense, she was. And there were no handcuffs, no security detail at the door, no shouted charge. This wasn't that kind of reckoning, and she wasn't going to pretend it was. She simply, quietly, had the floor now. "Chief Benton," she said into the silence, "I have the watch." "Yes, ma'am," Benton said. "You have the watch." The floor reset around her the way a floor does when authority is no longer in question. Fast, quiet, almost grateful. Colonel Naomi Calderon took the director's chair, openly now. The unmarked flight suit no longer a disguise, but just what she happened to be wearing on the night she stopped a catastrophe with a telephone. There was no court-martial. There would be a standards review, A real one. Careful. Documented. The kind that ends careers slowly and on paper, rather than in a single loud night. And Stauffer would sit through it and answer for the release he reached for. That was not his. But Calderon did not have him removed in front of the floor. She did not need the room to watch him broken. The horror on his own face had already done more than any escort to the door ever could. She pulled him off the floor herself, off the watch, pending review, and then, before he left, she took him aside, into the short hallway off the operations floor where the secure phones could not hear, and she gave him exactly one sentence, because he had earned a consequence, but not a humiliation, and because once, a long time ago, she had been the fast one too. "You wanted to be fast," she said. "Fast isn't the job. Owning it is." That was all. He opened his mouth and found nothing in it, and closed it, and went. Whether it would take, she did not know. Some of them it takes, some of them it doesn't. She had stopped trying to tell the difference in advance, and started just telling them the true thing and letting them carry it. If you have made it this far, if you watched a room full of professionals agree to be wrong and one quiet person refuse, then you already understand why this channel exists. Subscribe to Honor Tales, and if this story reached you, leave a comment about the loudest wrong room you have ever stood in. Everyone gets read. Back on the floor, she found First Lieutenant Priya Anand still at her console, still watching the Southwest signature, still not entirely sure she was allowed to feel what she was feeling. "You called it," Calderon said. 11 minutes in, you called it, and you held the call when the floor told you to drop it. That's the job. Most people learn it at 30, in the worst possible way. A beat. You learned it at 26, for free. Don't waste it. "I was scared the whole time," Anand said. It came out of her before she could stop it. The kind of confession a young officer makes only in the hour after the danger has passed, when the body is still shaking and the guard is down. "My hands wouldn't stop. I thought everyone could see." "Everyone could see," Calderon said. "That's not the part that matters. Brave isn't the absence of the shaking. Brave is saying it again while your hands shake. You said it 4 times. I counted." She let that sit. "When I was your age, I said it once. I want you to understand the size of the difference between once and 4 times. The difference is a household that went home tonight." She recommended Anand for the targeting cell that morning. Benton signed it without a word, and a small nod that, from Chief Master Sergeant Audra Benton, was the same as a parade. The high-value target had not moved. It was still there when the family cleared the area, an hour later, the small signatures rising and walking and dispersing into the dark, alive, never knowing. And when the structure was clean, truly clean, positive identification confirmed and reconfirmed, and the Southwest grid empty, Naomi Calderon keyed the secure line herself. "Strike Vesper. Cleared hot. My authority." She owned it. She logged it. The time, the call, the basis, in a small, flat hand. The same hand that had written down the time all night behind the second rail. The weapon went where it was supposed to go and nowhere else. She set the phone down. And then it rang again. Another line, another window, somewhere else in the dark. The next decision already arriving the way the next one always does. She looked at it for a moment. Then she picked it up, because that was the work. And the work goes on. And the only thing that makes it bearable is the certainty that the hand on the phone is a hand that will own the call. "Vesper," she said, "go ahead." Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.